The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Ravenshollow Castle when Marcus Thompson first walked through its ancient gates. Unlike the other guards who chatted loudly about their previous adventures and battles, Marcus remained completely silent. He carried only a worn leather bag and an old sword that had belonged to his grandfather, Captain Williams. The head of the Royal Guard looked skeptical as he examined the new recruit. Most guards came with recommendations from noble families or impressive war stories. Marcus had neither. His application letter contained just basic information: his name, age, and a simple statement: "I wish to serve the crown with honor." The other guards whispered among themselves, wondering about this strange newcomer who never spoke unless directly asked a question. Some thought he was mute, while others believed he was hiding something terrible from his past. Marcus heard their whispers but never responded. He simply went about his duties with quiet determination. On his first day, Marcus was assigned the night watch at the castle's main entrance. It was considered the most boring job. Nothing ever happened during those long, dark hours. The previous guard had often fallen asleep, but Marcus stood perfectly still throughout the entire night. His eyes never closed, and his attention never wavered. As weeks passed, people began to notice small things about the Silent Guard. The castle's head cook, Mrs. Eleanor, discovered that someone had been secretly organizing the storage rooms during night shifts. The scattered supplies were now neatly arranged, making her morning preparations much easier. When she tried to thank the guards, no one claimed responsibility. But she noticed Marcus's slight nod when their eyes met. Young Princess Isabella, only 12 years old, was fascinated by the guard who never spoke. She would often find excuses to walk past his post, hoping to hear his voice. One rainy afternoon, she slipped on the wet stones near the garden entrance. Marcus appeared instantly, catching her before she could fall and hurt herself. He helped her stand, checked that she was unharmed, returned to his position without saying a single word. The princess told her father, King Edward, about the incident. The king was impressed by Marcus's quick reflexes and protective instincts. However, he was also concerned about having a guard who refused to communicate properly. He decided to test Marcus's abilities and loyalty in the coming weeks. Marcus continued his duties with the same quiet dedication. He arrived early, stayed late, and never complained about any assignment. The other guards slowly began to respect his work ethic, even though they still found his silence strange. Some even started to appreciate the peaceful atmosphere he created. During shared duties one evening, as autumn leaves fell gently in the courtyard, Marcus noticed something unusual. A small group of men in dark clothes were watching the castle from the forest edge. They appeared for several nights in a row, always at the same time. Marcus began keeping detailed mental notes of their movements, patterns, and numbers. The suspicious activity worried him, but he faced a dilemma. Reporting his observations would require him to speak at length with his superiors, something he had carefully avoided since arriving at the castle. Marcus spent many sleepless hours considering his options, knowing that the safety of the royal family might depend on his decision. His grandfather's words echoed in his memory. True strength comes not from the loudest voice, but from the strongest heart. Marcus realized that his vow of silence, while personally important, should not endanger the people he had sworn to protect. As the 10th night of suspicious activity approached, Marcus made his decision. He would break his silence if necessary, to protect the castle and its inhabitants. Little did he know that this choice would change not only his own life, but also the way everyone at Ravenshollow Castle viewed courage and honor. Captain Williams was finishing his evening reports when Marcus knocked softly on his office door. The captain looked up in surprise. The Silent Guard had never approached him personally before. Marcus entered and stood at attention, his face showing signs of internal struggle. Sir Marcus said quietly, his voice rusty from disuse, "I need to report suspicious activity near the castle grounds." His words came slowly, as if each one required great effort to speak. Captain Williams leaned forward, shocked to finally hear the mysterious guard's voice. Marcus explained what he had observed over the past 10 nights, the group of men, their patterns, and his concerns about their intentions. He spoke clearly and precisely, providing details that impressed the experienced captain.
Why didn't you?
Report this sooner? Captain Williams asked. Marcus hesitated before answering. I hoped the situation would resolve itself, sir. I prefer not to speak unless absolutely necessary. The captain studied Marcus's face and saw genuine concern mixed with discomfort. He realized that breaking his silence had been a significant sacrifice for the young guard. You did the right thing, Marcus. We'll investigate immediately. That same night, Captain Williams organized a special patrol to observe the suspicious group. Marcus volunteered to guide them, using hand signals to communicate their movements. His knowledge of the forest paths and hiding spots proved invaluable. The patrol discovered that the men were indeed planning to infiltrate the castle during the upcoming harvest festival. When security would be focused on the celebrations, King Edward was informed of the threat and the guard who had discovered it. He requested a private meeting with Marcus the following morning. The king had never spoken directly to the Silent Guard before and was curious about the man who had potentially saved his family's lives. Marcus entered the king's private study with obvious nervousness. He had never been in such an important room before, surrounded by ancient books and royal artifacts. King Edward gestured for him to sit, but Marcus preferred to remain standing. I understand you've been serving here for 3 months without speaking to anyone, the king began. You broke that silence to protect us. I'm grateful, but I'm also curious about your reasons for remaining quiet. Marcus struggled with how to explain without revealing too much of his painful past. Your Majesty, I learned that words can cause great harm when used carelessly. I chose silence to avoid hurting others. The king sensed there was more to the story but didn't press for details. Instead, he asked about Marcus's observations and recommendations for improving castle security. Marcus spoke thoughtfully about weak points in their defenses and suggested several practical improvements. Princess Isabella burst into the study unexpectedly, as children often do. She stopped short when she saw Marcus and heard him speaking. With her father, you can talk, she exclaimed with delight. I knew you weren't really mute. Marcus smiled slightly at her enthusiasm, the first smile anyone at the castle had seen from him. Yes, Your Highness, I can speak when necessary. Why don't you talk more? She asked with the innocent curiosity of youth. Because listening is often more important than speaking, Marcus replied gently. When we're quiet, we can hear things that others miss. The princess considered this wisdom with the seriousness that children bring to new ideas. She nodded as if she understood something profound, then skipped away to tell her governess about her discovery. King Edward was impressed by Marcus's gentle interaction with his daughter and his thoughtful approach to communication. He decided to promote Marcus to a special position, personal guard to the royal family during public events. News of Marcus's promotion spread quickly through the castle. Some guards were jealous, wondering how someone who barely spoke could advance so rapidly. Others were curious about what he had done to earn the king's favor. Marcus continued his duties as usual, neither boasting about his promotion nor explaining his recent actions. The head cook, Mrs. Eleanor, approached Marcus. In the kitchen that evening, I always knew you were special, she said warmly. Thank you for keeping us all safe. She handed him a fresh loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. Marcus accepted the gift with a grateful nod. For the first time since arriving at the castle, he felt like he might truly belong somewhere. His sacrifice of silence had not only protected the royal family, but had also begun to earn him the respect and acceptance he had never dared to hope for. The harvest festival arrived with great celebration throughout the kingdom. Merchants set up colorful stalls in the castle courtyard, musicians played cheerful songs, and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air. As the new personal guard, Marcus had his most challenging assignment yet, protecting the royal family while they mingled freely with their subjects. Princess Isabella wore her finest blue dress and danced with the village children, her laughter echoing across the courtyard. Queen Margaret moved gracefully between the merchant stalls, admiring handmade crafts and speaking kindly to the craftspeople. King Edward gave a speech thanking the farmers for their hard work and promising continued prosperity for the kingdom. Marcus positioned himself strategically where he could observe the entire celebration while remaining close to the royal family. His trained eyes constantly scanned the crowd, looking for anything unusual or threatening. He had memorized the faces of known troublemakers and potential threats from Captain Williams's briefings around midday. Marcus noticed a man in a brown cloak who seemed out of place. Unlike the other festival-goers who were laughing and enjoying themselves, this man moved purposefully through the crowd, his eyes focused intently on King Edward. Marcus began following him discreetly, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection while keeping the suspicious figure in sight. The cloaked man approached closer to the king, who was examining a display of harvested vegetables. Marcus saw the man reach inside his cloak and begin to withdraw something metallic. Without hesitation, Marcus moved swiftly through the crowd, using his knowledge of the courtyard layout to intercept the potential threat, just as the man pulled out what appeared to be a dagger. Marcus appeared beside him as if from nowhere. In one smooth motion, he grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it, causing the weapon to fall harmlessly to the ground. The crowd gasped and stepped back as Marcus held the would-be assassin firmly, but without causing unnecessary harm. "Your Majesty," Marcus called out clearly, his voice carrying over the suddenly quiet courtyard. "Please step back." King Edward immediately understood the situation and moved away while other guards rushed to assist Marcus. The captured man struggled briefly but realized he was completely outmatched by Marcus's strength and skill. Captain Williams arrived within seconds and took custody of the prisoner. The festival continued, but with a more subdued atmosphere. Many people whispered about the guard, who had moved like a shadow to protect their king. The royal family was shaken but grateful, especially Queen Margaret, who realized how close they had come to tragedy. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the courtyard was cleaned, King Edward summoned Marcus to his private chambers. The Queen and Princess were also present, wanting to thank their protector personally. "Marcus," the king began, his voice filled with genuine gratitude, "you saved my life today. Your quick thinking and brave actions prevented what could have been a disaster for our kingdom." "I was simply doing my duty, Your Majesty," Marcus replied humbly. "No," Queen Margaret interjected softly, "you did much more than duty required. You risked your own safety to protect my husband. How can we ever repay such loyalty?" Princess Isabella ran forward and hugged Marcus around the waist, something that would have been unthinkable for a royal to do with a common guard. "For keeping Papa safe," she whispered. Marcus gently patted her head, deeply moved by her innocent affection. He looked at the royal family, these people who had shown him kindness and acceptance, despite his unusual behavior, and felt a warmth in his heart that he had not experienced in years. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "serving your family has given my life purpose. I ask for no reward beyond the honor of continuing to protect you." The king studied Marcus's sincere face and made a decision that would surprise everyone. "Marcus Thompson, I hereby grant you the title of Royal Guardian. With all the privileges and responsibilities that come with this position, you will be my personal protector and advisor on security matters." The other guards would later learn that Royal Guardian was a position that hadn't existed for over 50 years. It was reserved only for individuals who had demonstrated exceptional loyalty, skill, and judgment. Marcus had earned this honor not through noble birth or political connections, but through his actions and character. As news of Marcus's heroism and promotion spread throughout the castle and beyond, people began to understand that true strength didn't always require loud proclamations or boastful words. Sometimes the most powerful guardians were those who watched silently, acted decisively, and spoke only when their words could make a real difference. Winter settled over Ravenshollow Castle like a heavy blanket, bringing shorter days and longer nights for Marcus to contemplate his new responsibilities as royal guardian. His small quarters had been moved closer to the royal family's chambers, and he now had access to classified information about kingdom security that few others knew. One snowy evening, while reviewing reports in his new office, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Thomas, a young guard who had recently joined the castle staff, knocked nervously on his door. Thomas had always been curious about Marcus's background and had finally gathered the courage to ask direct questions. Sir Marcus, Thomas began hesitantly. The other guards have been wondering about your past. You appeared here with no references, no stories of previous service, and you barely speak to anyone. Some are saying you might be hiding something important. Marcus set down his papers and looked at the young man thoughtfully. He had expected this conversation eventually, but it still made him uncomfortable. What exactly are they wondering, Thomas? Well, sir, your fighting skills are clearly advanced, far beyond what most guards possess. The way you handled that assassin at the festival was like nothing we've ever seen. And your knowledge of security and strategy suggests formal training that you've never mentioned. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Looking out at the snow-covered courtyard where he had first proven himself months ago, he remained silent for so long that Thomas began to think he wouldn't answer at all. Thomas, Marcus finally said, his voice carrying a weight of old pain, some stories are better left untold. My past contains mistakes that I cannot undo, and losses that still cause me great sorrow. I came here seeking a chance to serve with honor, nothing more. The young guard sensed the deep emotion behind Marcus's careful words. But sir, the others respect you now. Whatever happened before, you've proven yourself here. Maybe sharing your story would help them understand you better. Marcus turned back to face Thomas, and for the first time, the young man saw genuine vulnerability in the royal guardian's eyes. 3 years ago, I served as a captain in the king's army on the northern border. I was known for my tactical skills and my ability to inspire men in battle. He paused, clearly struggling with the memories. During a particularly dangerous mission, I gave orders that I believed would save lives. I was confident in my decision, praised my own strategic thinking, and convinced my men that victory was certain. Thomas waited patiently, sensing that Marcus was sharing something he had never told anyone before. My overconfidence led to an ambush that cost the lives of 12 good soldiers under my command. Marcus continued, his voice becoming quieter. Among them was my younger brother David, who had joined the army specifically to serve under my leadership. The weight of this revelation settled heavily in the small room. Thomas began to understand why Marcus had chosen silence over the confident, words that had once led to tragedy. I survived the battle, but I couldn't survive the guilt, Marcus explained. I resigned my commission and spent 2 years wandering the kingdom, trying to find a way to make amends for my failures. When I arrived here, I decided that if I was going to serve again, it would be with actions rather than words. Thomas was moved by Marcus's honesty and the pain he carried. Sir, that tragedy wasn't entirely your fault. War is unpredictable, and commanders must make difficult decisions with incomplete information. Perhaps, Marcus replied, but words spoken with too much confidence led to my brother's death. I decided that if I couldn't speak with absolute certainty, I would prefer not to speak at all. Their conversation was interrupted by urgent knocking at the door. Captain Williams entered quickly, his face showing serious concern. Marcus, we've received intelligence about a potential threat to Princess Isabella. A group of foreign agents may be planning to kidnap her during her upcoming birthday celebration. Marcus immediately shifted into his professional mode, but Thomas noticed that he spoke more freely now, as if sharing his story had lifted some invisible burden. What do we know about their plans, Captain? Very little, which is what makes this so dangerous. They've been careful to avoid our usual sources of information. We need someone who can blend in with the celebration while maintaining close surveillance of the princess. Marcus considered the challenge carefully. The princess's birthday celebration would bring together hundreds of guests from across the kingdom. Protecting her would require not just observation skills, but also the ability to interact naturally with nobles and dignitaries if suspicious activity was discovered. I'll need to prepare differently for this assignment, Marcus said thoughtfully. If I'm going to protect the princess effectively, I may need to engage in conversations and social interactions that I've been avoiding. Thomas spoke up unexpectedly. Sir, if you need someone to help with the social aspects while you focus on security, I could assist. I'm comfortable talking with people, and I could serve as your voice when necessary. Marcus looked at the young guard with new appreciation. The offer showed both courage and understanding of Marcus's struggles. That's a thoughtful suggestion. Thomas. Captain Williams, what do you think? The captain nodded approvingly. A 2-person team could be very effective. Thomas can handle the social interactions, while you focus on threat assessment and response. As they began planning the protection strategy for Princess Isabella's birthday, Marcus realized that his decision to share his painful past had already begun to change things. He was no longer carrying his burdens alone, and for the first time in years, he felt like he might be able to find a balance between his need for silence and his duty to protect those he served. Princess Isabella's 13th birthday celebration transformed Raven's Hollow Castle into a wonderland of decorations, music, and joyful chaos. Colorful banners hung from every wall, tables overflowed with elaborate cakes and treats, and guests from neighboring kingdoms filled the great hall with laughter and conversation. Marcus wore his finest formal uniform, specially prepared for his role as royal guardian during important state functions. Thomas stood nearby, dressed as a regular guest to blend in with the crowd. They had developed a system of subtle hand signals that allowed them to communicate without drawing attention to their surveillance activities. Princess Isabella looked radiant in a golden dress that sparkled as she moved between her guests, thanking them for their gifts and graciously accepting their birthday wishes. She had specifically requested that Marcus remain close during the celebration, as his presence made her feel safe and protected. The first few hours passed without incident. Marcus observed the typical activities of a royal birthday party: noble children playing games, adults discussing politics and trade, and servants efficiently managing the flow of food and drinks. His trained eye cataloged every face, every movement, and every deviation from normal behavior. Around mid-afternoon, Thomas signaled that he had noticed something concerning. A group of 3 men, dressed as merchants, had been asking unusually specific questions about the castle's layout and the princess's daily schedule. They claimed to be interested in future business opportunities, but their questions seemed more focused on security details than commerce. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe these suspicious individuals while maintaining his protective proximity to Princess Isabella. He watched as they gradually separated and began moving toward different exits, as if preparing to leave with the information they had gathered. One of the men approached Princess Isabella directly, offering her an ornate jewelry box as a special birthday gift from admirers in the Eastern Kingdoms. The princess, taught to be polite to all guests, reached out to accept the present. Marcus moved instantly, his years of training taking over. He intercepted the gift before it reached the princess's hands, his instincts warning him that something was wrong with the situation. The jewelry box felt unusually heavy and made a subtle ticking sound that most people would miss. "Your Highness," Marcus said clearly, his voice carrying across the nearby conversations, "please step back while I examine this gift more carefully." The man who had offered the box immediately tried to leave, but Thomas was ready and blocked his path toward the exit. The other 2 suspicious individuals also began moving more urgently, confirming Marcus's fears about their coordinated plan. Marcus carefully carried the jewelry box to an empty side chamber while Captain Williams and additional guards detained the 3 men. Using knowledge gained from his military experience, Marcus determined that the box contained a small explosive device designed to harm anyone who opened it. The realization that someone had attempted to hurt Princess Isabella with such a cruel and cowardly method filled Marcus with an anger he had not felt since his brother's death. However, his years of practicing emotional control allowed him to channel that anger into focused determination to protect the royal family. King Edward and Queen Margaret were quickly informed of the situation. The birthday celebration continued under increased security, but the joyful atmosphere had been dampened by the knowledge of how close they had come to tragedy. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the immediate threat had been resolved, Princess Isabella approached Marcus in the garden where he was completing his final security check of the castle grounds. "Marcus," she said softly, "Mama told me what really happened with that jewelry box. You saved my life today, didn't you?" Marcus knelt down to her eye level, something he had never done before, despite their many interactions. "Your Highness, protecting you is the most important duty I have ever had. I would never let anyone hurt you." The princess studied his face with the perceptive wisdom that some children possess beyond their years. You're not just a guard, are you? You're like a guardian angel who watches over our family." Her innocent words touched something deep in Marcus's heart. For the first time since his brother's death, he felt that his life had clear meaning and purpose again. "I try to be worthy of your family's trust, Princess." "You know," Isabella continued thoughtfully, "I used to wish you would talk more because I was curious about you, but now I understand that you say exactly what needs to be said, when it needs to be said. That's much better than people who talk all the time but don't mean anything important." Marcus smiled at her mature insight. "Oh, you're very wise for someone who just turned 13, Your Highness." "Will you make me a promise?" she asked seriously. "If I can, Princess. Promise that you'll never leave our family. We need you here, and I think you need us too." Marcus considered her request carefully. The scared, guilty man who had arrived at Ravenshollow Castle almost a year ago had been transformed by the acceptance and purpose he had found here. His silence was no longer a burden of shame, but a tool of strength that he used to better protect those he served. "I promise, Princess Isabella," he said solemnly. "I will serve your family with honor for as long as you'll have me." As they walked back toward the castle together, Marcus realized that he had finally found the redemption he had been seeking. His brother's memory would always carry sadness, but it no longer carried shame. He had learned to use his skills and his silence to protect rather than to command. And in doing so, he had discovered a form of courage he had never known before. 5 years had passed since Marcus first walked through the gates of Ravenshollow Castle. The Silent Guard had become a legend not just within the castle walls, but throughout the entire kingdom. Stories of his protective dedication and quiet heroism spread from village to village, inspiring others to consider that true strength often came without fanfare or boastful words. Princess Isabella, now 18, and preparing for her eventual role as queen, had grown into a thoughtful and observant young woman. She credited much of her character development to watching Marcus over the years, learning that actions spoke louder than words, that patience was more powerful than haste, and that true loyalty required personal sacrifice. On a spring morning that brought memories of his first days at the castle, Marcus stood in the courtyard training a new group of guard recruits. Among them was David, a young man from a nearby village who had specifically requested to serve under Marcus's guidance after hearing stories of the Royal Guardian's honor and skill. "Sir Marcus," David asked during a break in their training, "the other instructors teach us combat techniques and security procedures, but they also tell us we need to be commanding and vocal to earn respect. You've gained more respect than anyone here, yet you rarely speak during training. How do we reconcile these different approaches?" Marcus observed the eager faces of the young recruits, all waiting for his answer. Over the years, he had gradually become more comfortable speaking when his words could provide genuine guidance or protection. Teaching had become one of the few times he used his voice freely. David, Marcus replied thoughtfully, "Respect cannot be demanded through loud words or commanding gestures. It must be earned through consistent actions, reliable character, and genuine care for those you serve. When people know they can trust you to protect them without seeking personal glory, they will respect you naturally." Another recruit, a girl named Sarah, who had fought for the right to join the guard despite traditional objections, asked, "But sir, how do we know when it's important to speak up? Sometimes silence can be mistaken for weakness or indifference." This appreciated the thoughtful question. "Sarah, you must learn to distinguish between silence that comes from wisdom and silence that comes from fear. When someone's safety is at stake, when injustice is occurring, or when your knowledge can prevent harm, that is the time to use your voice. In all other moments, listening and observing will teach you more than talking." The training session continued with Marcus demonstrating defensive techniques that emphasized protection over aggression. His methods had evolved over the years to focus on neutralizing threats with minimal violence, reflecting his belief that a true guardian should use only the force necessary to protect those in their care. That evening, King Edward summoned Marcus to his study for their monthly security review. These meetings had become more than professional consultations. They were conversations between two men who had developed mutual respect and understanding over the years. Marcus, the king, began. I've been thinking about your influence on this castle and our kingdom. You arrived here as a broken man seeking redemption, but you've become something much more significant, a symbol of what it means to serve with true honor. Marcus listened quietly, still uncomfortable with praise, but no longer actively avoiding it. I want to establish a new tradition, the king continued. The Order of the Silent Guardian, a recognition for individuals who demonstrate exceptional loyalty, courage, and wisdom through their actions rather than their words. You would be the first recipient, and the standard by which all future members would be measured. The offer touched Marcus deeply, but he had learned to consider the broader implications of such honors. Your Majesty, I'm grateful for your recognition, but I wonder if creating an order based on silence might be misunderstood. The goal should not be to encourage people to stop speaking, but to encourage them to speak more thoughtfully. King Edward smiled at Marcus's response. That's exactly why you're the right person to establish this tradition. The order would not be about remaining silent, but about understanding when words are necessary and when actions are more powerful. Several weeks later, the formal ceremony establishing the Order of the Silent Guardian took place in the Great Hall. Representatives from kingdoms throughout the region attended to witness this unique recognition of service that valued character over charisma. Princess Isabella, now old enough to participate in official ceremonies, presented Marcus with the distinctive badge of the new order, a silver shield with an open eye symbolizing vigilant protection. As she placed the ribbon around his neck, she whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that true strength doesn't need to announce itself." Marcus's acceptance speech was predictably brief but meaningful. Your Majesty, honored guests, I accept. This recognition not for myself, but for all those who serve quietly and faithfully in positions great and small. May this order inspire others to find their own ways of making the world safer and more honorable through their dedicated actions. As the ceremony concluded and guests began to mingle in celebration, Marcus stepped outside onto the castle's ramparts. The familiar courtyard spread below him, filled with the same purpose and activity that had first intimidated him years ago. But now it felt like home. Thomas, now a captain himself and Marcus's trusted friend, joined him in the quiet observation. Do you ever regret the path that brought you here? He asked. Marcus considered the question carefully, as he did all things. I regret the mistakes I made and the lives that were lost because of them, but I cannot regret the journey that led me to find my true purpose. My brother would be proud to know that his death taught me how to better protect life. As the stars appeared overhead, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken. He had arrived at Ravenshollow Castle as a man fleeing his failures, seeking nothing more than a quiet place to serve without causing further harm. Instead, he had discovered that silence could be a form of strength, that listening could be more powerful than speaking, and that true honor came from protecting others rather than promoting oneself. The legend of the Silent Guardian would continue long after Marcus's own service ended, inspiring future generations to consider that heroism came in many forms. Sometimes the greatest guardians were not those who announced their presence with bold proclamations, but those who stood quietly in the shadows, ready to act when their courage was needed most. In the years to come, whenever people spoke of Marcus Thompson, they would remember not the words he didn't say, but the lives he saved, the loyalty he demonstrated, and the example he set for finding redemption through selfless service. His story had become proof that even those who carried the heaviest burdens of guilt and regret could find their way back to honor, one silent act of courage at a time.